Apotheosis Chapter 20. Teacher Su had broken the rules for Xiao Yufeng, causing the teachers from the other peaks to be quite dissatisfied. But when they thought of Teacher Su's background, no one dared to criticize her in front of her. This white-browed elder was only in charge of invigilating the C exam, so he didn't dare to offend Teacher Su. Taking advantage of his seniority, he reluctantly gave a few words of advice. If Teacher Su didn't listen, then he wouldn't say anything. As for the kid who was being beaten, according to the white-browed elder's opinion, he might have cultivated some unique body refining technique, which gave him a unique physique. His ability to take a beating was outstanding. But the Blue Cloud sect included so many outstanding disciples of the Empire. Compared to those monstrous geniuses of the Empire, this kid was nothing. He had passed the qualifiers, but the following tests wouldn't be so simple. Who knows, maybe he wouldn't be able to pass. 30 li away. The four people had finally exhausted all their strength. They couldn't muster up any more strength. One by one, they fell to the ground, panting heavily. They had also come to participate in the C exam. Killing that kid in the viscera refining stage was just a side mission. But now, they were half-dead tired. Don't mention fighting that kid, even passing the C exam was impossible. One had to know that there was still at least 5 or 6 li to go. In their current state, even crawling up was extremely difficult. Luo Zheng shook his arms. At this time, he was refreshed and full of energy. The impurities in his internal organs had been purified by a lot from today's punches. If he could take a few more of these punches, he would be able to reach the peak of the viscera refining stage in a short period of time. Unfortunately, this kind of opportunity didn't come often. Luo Zheng clearly wanted to continue. He saw that the scholar was looking at him with a vicious expression. He walked in front of him, squatted down and asked, "The Wang Gongzi you mentioned just now should be Wang Hengji, right?" The scholar sneered, "Since you know, why don't you kneel down and accept your death? Wang Gongzi is a descendant of a landowning household. Do you think you have a chance to live after offending him? Even if you enter the Blue Cloud sect, you will still die." Luo Zheng nodded and smiled, "Help me pass a message to Wang Gongzi. I have no enmity with him. Don't involve him in my relationship with Luo Peiran." What a joke. Who is Wang Gongzi? Will he listen to you? Are you qualified to talk to him? If I want to kill you, I only need to say a word. The scholar continued to sneer. Boom! Before the scholar could finish his sentence, Luo Zheng suddenly landed a heavy punch on his lower jaw. His whole body was thrown into the air and flipped in a circle before being pressed back down to the ground. The scholar's teeth were broken and his mouth was full of blood. At this moment, he could no longer speak. Luo Zheng rubbed his fists and said coldly, "It's so hard for you to pass on a message. Do you really think I don't have a temper? I've been beaten up by you guys for so long. Isn't this one punch going easy on you?" Just as Luo Zheng said, these four people had been chasing Luo Zheng for a long time. Although they were shocked by Luo Zheng's abnormal defensive power, Luo Zheng didn't fight back once as he ran away. They stubbornly believed that Luo Zheng was just a tortoise hiding in its shell and couldn't pose a threat to them. However, Luo Zheng's punch just now was so fierce and merciless. The other three instantly understood that this guy was definitely not a tortoise, but a ferocious lion. After understanding this, they were like frightened rabbits, staring blankly at Luo Zheng. Now, the three of them were completely exhausted. Even if they wanted to run, they couldn't, let alone fight back. Luo Zheng found the strong man and asked, "Did you hear what I said just now? Do you need me to repeat it again?" "I heard it clearly, I heard it clearly. I will pass on your words to young Master Wang." The strong man forced a smile. He was a person who understood the situation. If he didn't behave now, he would end up like that scholar. He was asking for trouble. Luo Zheng nodded with satisfaction. He ignored these people and continued on the path. On the entire path, Luo Zheng was the only one. Although he had passed the sea test, he wanted to see if he could continue on. After chasing for a while, he had run another 5 or 6 li. If he ran another 5 li, he would reach the end of the marrow refining stage. He wanted to see where his limit was. Under the pressure of 2,000 kilograms, his speed was already extremely slow. It took him less than an hour to finally see the stone tablet in front of him. If a marrow refining stage cultivator reached this stone tablet, they would be considered to have passed the sea test. However, they hadn't reached the end of the path. Who knew how much more pressure would there be after crossing this stone tablet? Luo Zheng arrived in front of the stone tablet. Without any hesitation, he lifted his leg and stepped over. Just as he stepped over the stone tablet, an extremely terrifying pressure pressed down on him. Plop. It was as if a mountain covered Luo Zheng's body, pressing Luo Zheng to the ground. This pressure is too much. Luo Zheng's face, stomach, and limbs were stuck to the ground like glue. He couldn't move at all. He tried to lift his head, but it felt as if his head weighed tens of thousands of jin. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't lift it. Luo Zheng was a bit depressed. 10 li was 1,000 jin of pressure. 20 li was 2,000 jin of pressure. 30 li was 4,000 jin of pressure. Logically speaking, 40 li should be 8,000 jin of pressure. However, he felt tens of thousands of jin of pressure. The pressure seemed to have increased tenfold. I don't believe it. Luo Zheng was also angry. He communicated with the 2 dragon scales in his body and transferred the power from them to his body. Then he roared and circulated all the power in his body. Rise for me. All the power in his body poured out. Blue veins popped out on his body. Every muscle swelled to the limit and emitted a bronze glow. Withstanding such a fierce power, Luo Zheng forcibly propped himself up with his hands. However, he was still in a squatting position. He didn't stand up completely. Again. Luo Zheng took a deep breath. This time, he poured all the power in his body into his legs. Pressing his hands on his thighs, he slowly rose up in a rather embarrassing position. The speed at which he got up was very slow. It was almost 1 centimeter at a time. From squatting to standing up, this simple action took him the time it took to burn a stick of incense. At this time, he was sweating profusely. His chest was heaving up and down violently. It seemed as if all the power in his body was about to be exhausted. However, he still stood up. Although he had stood up, it was extremely difficult for him to take a step forward. He could foresee that as soon as he raised his feet, his body would immediately lose balance and then fall to the ground. However, at this time, he suddenly felt a warm current flowing out from his body. What's going on? His arms, body, and legs were constantly flowing with warm currents. Moreover, these warm currents were surging violently. There were so many of them that they couldn't be compared to before. Luo Zheng's face was full of confusion. There was no one beating him now. How could there be warm currents? I understand. After understanding, Luo Zheng's face suddenly, his body could produce warm currents because the power of others poured into his body. His body converted the power into warm currents, which could then cleanse his body. Now, there was indeed no one beating him. However, the pressure from the outside world had reached a terrifying level. The pressure was no weaker than the power of others beating him. His body was converting this pressure into warm currents and starting to cleanse his body. This pressure was endless, torrential, and very evenly applied to Luo Zheng's body. Therefore, Luo Zheng's whole body was flowing with warm currents. This kind of high-pressure environment was actually the best place for Luo Zheng to cultivate. He was overjoyed. He stood on the spot and closed his eyes, allowing the warm currents to remove the impurities in his organs. While Luo Zheng was enjoying himself, the white-bearded old man and instructor Su were frightened. The first 30 miles of the Blue Cloud sect's path was used to hold the sea test. Under normal circumstances, cultivators of the bone refining realm, viscera refining realm, and marrow refining realm would have to dye their jade pendants red to advance to the next stage. However, the area after 30 miles was reserved for cultivators of the Xiantian realm. The pressure inside reached a terrifying 50,000 jin, which was equivalent to 50 ding of force. As long as one stood inside, it would be like 50 ding of force pressing down on one's body. With such a terrifying pressure, not to mention marrow refining realm cultivators, even half-step Xiantian realm cultivators would shrink back. Only those who had stepped into the Xiantian realm could withstand such pressure. Ordinary bone refining realm and viscera refining realm cultivators would be crushed if they were thrown in. Although this kid's body was extremely strong and could withstand the attacks of 4 marrow refining realm cultivators, he would not stand a chance against 50 ding of force. The two of them realized the severity of the problem. They jumped onto 2 flying chariots and rushed forward. With the flying chariot speed, they covered the distance of 30 miles in an instant. When the two of them jumped off their respective flying chariots, they realized that not only was Luo Zheng unscathed, he was even crawling up from the ground. When the white-browed old man saw this scene, he muttered, "I've presided over the sea test for so many years, but I've never seen anything like this. I've really never seen anything like this."